The financial market turbulence, which is very much still on the way, it's a significant risk. And the report discusses how to go from the financial market turbulence to sustain growth in the European economy. And then we have 3 analytical chapters on how to strengthen financial systems in Europe, in the advanced European economies, the first chapter, and the other 2 on emerging European economies. The first, how to manage a rapid financial deepening in emerging Europe, which has been going on in this decade, but also reforms to sustain financial sector development, given that there is a lot of room still in emerging Europe. So let me start with the outlook for the European economy. We're projecting a moderate slowing, but with risks ahead. And this chart basically summarizes our projections. You see here, advanced European economies are in blue, new EU member countries in red, and other emerging economies in Europe in yellow. And in pink here you have the Croatian economy. What we see is that in recent years throughout Europe, economic performance has actually improved. The European economy has been accelerating basically in recent years, both advanced and emerging European economies. What we also see is that on the way ahead, this year and next year, we're projecting a slowdown. Actually, if we were to revisit these projections, again, these projections were done sometime in September, this slowdown in 2008 will be more severe than what you see here. Because some of the risks that we're discussing in our report have actually materialized. What we see, Croatia accelerated economic growth in 2007, but we are projecting a slowdown to start in 2008, consistent with the trading partners of Croatia. Still, the European economy is projected to do better than the US economy, and I will talk about it more in a while, but not as good compared to East Asia, to emerging Asian economies, which continue growing, continue being the fastest growing region in the world economy. Inflation recently has been more of a concern. Here you see inflation in new EU member countries, but inflation in Croatia is following a similar trend lately. Although in recent years most of the European countries have reduced inflation to single digits, what we see here is that in recent months inflation has increased again. Partly this is explained by high energy prices, primarily high oil prices, but also high food prices in recent months. But core inflation in this line, which actually excludes energy and food prices, has also increased. So there is definitely some overheating going on in emerging Europe. This is also true in the euro area. The latest inflation was 2.6%, which is way above the ECB target of 2%. As I said earlier, some of the risks that we discussed in our report have actually materialized. Here is what we assumed, and this was in November 8 when I left from Washington, but more or less the picture is the same. Oil prices are now much higher than when we were writing the report, and the euro is much stronger compared to the dollar. This will affect the real economy. However, this should be put in a perspective. Although the euro is much stronger with respect to the dollar, and it has appreciated in recent years, compared to other currencies, this appreciation is not as significant. Here you see in the last row in nominal effective terms. Since we wrote the report, the euro has appreciated only by 2.2%. And if you are to look in recent years, you see that it has appreciated compared to non-dollar currencies, but not as much as compared to the US dollar. You get the same if you adjust for relative prices. So this means that what is driving this appreciation is more the weakness of the dollar rather than the strength of the euro. According to our estimates, in real effective terms, the euro remains within an equilibrium range, although at the upper limit of this range. And definitely this is a risk going forward. If this appreciation continues, it will affect the real economy. It has not affected it yet, and it has not affected European exports. The German economy, for example, continues being the best exporter in the world. Oil prices have also increased a lot. They have, up to an extent, they have caused an increase in current account deficit in some emerging European countries, including in Croatia. But again, the impact in the European economy has not been significant, partly because in euro terms, The increase in oil prices is less than in dollar terms. Also, energy prices in most of the European countries are relatively high, and this limits demand. But again, energy prices are a risk going forward, both in terms of economic growth as a supply shock, but it also will affect inflation pressures. Still, we expect the European economy to do better than the US economy. And here you see actually the magazine The Economist, which in summer it came out with a cover, Can Europe's Recovery Last? This was before the financial market turbulence, and the magazine was presenting the evidence on the relatively good economic performance throughout Europe, and it was discussing the sustainability of this performance. The second cover on the US economy came up 3 weeks ago, and it was listing the vulnerabilities of the US economy, basically projecting a significant slowdown. And here in this graph you see our projections for domestic demand. In advanced euro, in blue color, we expect that domestic demand will be much stronger than in the United States in the short term. And the main reason is that although the financial market turbulence, for which I'm going to talk in detail in a while, is affecting the European economy, the impact is indirect, primarily through exposure of the financial sector in Europe to investments in the US. The impact on the US economy is direct. It does not only affecting credit and the financial sector, it affects the housing markets, housing prices, the consumer's wealth, construction activity. So it has a direct impact on the consumer's portfolio, the consumer's wealth, and on investment. So as a result, it will affect the real economy much more in the United States than in Europe. Now, the good news in Europe is that there is economic convergence going on. This means that countries that are relatively poor are catching up. This was not the case in the late 90s, as you see here, comparing Europe with the rest of the world. We see lack of convergence or even divergence. But in this decade, what we see, while the lack of convergence continues in the rest of the world, blue color here, we see that in the red line here, there is convergence in Europe. Countries with a relatively lower GDP per capita are growing faster. Emerging Europe is growing faster than advanced Europe, and therefore is catching up. Primarily, this development is throughout emerging Europe. Is much stronger in the Baltics. They are growing the fastest. Central Europe is also growing fast, but it's already ahead of the curve. Southeastern Europe is behind, both in terms of growth rates, but also in terms of GDP per capita. Now, given that the Southeastern Europe is behind, you will expect these countries to grow much faster and to catch up. But structural impediments, for which we're going to talk in a while, have not allowed this to happen. So convergence throughout emerging Europe, not as strong as Southeastern Europe, stronger in the Baltics, and Central Europe is already ahead. Now, what is driving this process? As we discussed in our report, the main driving force is the fact that gradually the European economy is becoming one economy. There is very fast, very strong economic integration within Europe, in terms of international trade, in terms of financial integration, in terms of labor market integration, although to a smaller extent. And here in the first chart, you see trade integration. This chart shows intra-regional trade as a share of GDP. The first line is inside Europe, the second is inside the EU, and then you have other continents, Western Hemisphere, Asia, Africa, and Middle East. And what we see in this chart is that European countries as a share of GDP trade much more with each other than countries in any other continent. Now, if you were parentheses here, if you were to add a line here showing trade within the United States, definitely it will be up there. It will be much more than Europe as a share of GDP. But in a way, many times, like large economies trade within borders much more than across borders. So here the relative comparison is among large regions. This is why we look at continents. Moreover, intra-European trade is increasing at a very fast pace, as you see here.